right, everybody, welcome back. This is the end of the world. Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we are discussing the greatest movie ever made.
Bar none.
That's right. It's 1998's Armageddon, directed by the greatest filmmaker of all time, Michael Bay. And we don't have any real news to go over this week. We've both been moving around. A lot of things.
We've both been doing family time, and there's absolutely not been a moment to see if anything is actually happening on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I've kept abreast as I usually do of various goings on, and none of them are good. Listen to some pods today about the market turmoil. No one has the hard answers yet, but hopefully,
really interesting. Okay.
I think it's not world ending. It's actually probably out of our purview at this point.
Well, I'm sure the economists who always guide us through these storms.
Yeah, I was listening to the Ones and Twos podcast with Adam Tooze, co-hosted by my friend Cameron Abadi. Very informative, actually, really good, like succinct podcast. Highly recommended. Little technical at times if you're not in that world, which I am very much not. But I think it does. I think it does a good job of sort of explaining it to the lay listener, if you will.
Well, let's try to explain Armageddon to the lay listener.
Do you know where the word?
It's such a complicated film.
Let's take it back to the old school. Michael, do you know where the word Armageddon comes from?
No, I have no idea.
If you had to guess, where would you say?
The Bible?
Bingo. It's from a city called Megiddo. It's this alleged final battle that'll occur. I think it's alluded to in the Book of Revelation. The final battle between the beast and the lamb, which is to say the devil, the Antichrist, and JC, will occur at this place Megiddo, which is a little bit south of Jerusalem, and is one of those places that was like a historical point of conflict between the Egyptians as they were coming north and the Syrians and the Hittites and the various other powers, some of whom we talked about a little bit in the Bronze Age collapse episode. So it's a very biblical allusion. A lot of religions have their own name for the end of the world. Apocalypse is another word also from the Bible, which actually just means the unveiling, right? And then, of course, Ragnarok is the Norse myth concept for the end of days, the twilight of the idols, the downfall of the gods, all that good stuff. Armageddon, however, in this sense, refers to a late 90s blockbuster starring Bruce Willis, Billy Bob Thornton, a young Ben Affleck, Liv Tyler, Steve Buscemi, William Fichtner, Owen Wilson.
They're all there.
The hits. It's a murderer's row.
Absolutely.
Of 90s super talent. And so, some of whom would blossom into even bigger stars in the coming years.
It's one like when you're rewatching it, you're like, oh, that guy too. Oh man, he's in it. When they're putting the posse together, and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, did you see this movie when it came out?
Oh yeah, I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, I think I did as well.
It was back with they don't make them like this anymore. It's a pure blockbuster.
When we talked about 2012, 2012 was like a movie that harkens back to this kind of blockbuster, colossal scale. Independence Day, like this sort of. I guess like the Spielberg War of the Worlds kind of aspires to this. The Pitt movie World War Z has a little bit of this energy.
Sure, but there's also there's something also about these movies that don't have. I mean, obviously with the evolution of blockbuster cinema, there's no superheroes, supernatural. It's like.
Well, I mean, this movie is very supernatural, but
sure. I mean, sure.
In terms of none of the laws of physics apply.
Method or reality based, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get it. There's nothing.
Bruce Willis himself can't fly.
Right. No one can shoot lasers out of their eyes.
And there's so many movies where we'll talk about it later, but disasters are happening, but they're still getting their bits off. They're still sort of riffing up there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
always this weird comic tone.
I would say you're right. I would say that this movie is very self-aware in a 90s way, right?
Yes.
Like they're all kind of winking at the like, wow, how are we going to get out of this one,
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Doesn't look so good so far, Doc. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, exactly.
why don't you just briefly explain the ironclad starting point for this movie?
So, there is an unbelievable set of sequences that bring us into this film, right? I mean, it starts.
I didn't remember this.
No, I
actually.
mean, one thing that's really egregious is it opens with an educational film out of context.
Mhm.
It is a non-diegetic. In other words, they just play this like clip of like how the dinosaurs went extinct,
Yeah.
and like it
Yeah.
happened 66 million years ago or whatever. It could happen
Yeah.
again. But there's no like classroom that we cut away to where kids are watching
No,
it
no.
and then they look out the window and like a meteor falls or something. It's just disconnected.
It's presented in a way that is similar to like a murder mystery that starts with a backstory and then it says like 4 weeks later or whatever, or 4 weeks earlier. But this one literally just says 65 million years later. Like it's
Yeah, yeah,
it's so ridiculous.
but it also doesn't make sense because we're meant to understand that little film strip we watched was made 65 million, or
Right, right.
just it's a very took me out of it immediately.
Yeah.
Then we have a bunch of equally egregious happenings. First, there's the space shuttle. They're working on
Mhm.
something up in space, and
They're just hanging out.
with no warning, they're destroyed by an asteroid. Initial thoughts are: did the Chinese, did the Russians shoot us down? Is there some global politics at play here? No, no, it's a
No.
disaster. Then we meet Carl, a local astronomer who
Mhm.
lives in a trailer and has a giant telescope and is
Yeah,
married.
kind of like Woody Harrelson in
Yeah, I was thinking that as well.
2012 vibes.
Very, very much that same kind of a crank,
Wacky.
a crank astronomer who's married to Grace Zabriskie, aka Sarah Palmer from Twin Peaks, the most terrifying actress. I mean, brilliant actress, but
Great actress.
someone who's really
she's also
she's in
Susan Ross's mother.
yeah, she's in Seinfeld, exactly.
Yeah.
She's had a long and very prolific career.
Mm.
This is a very small role, and her main role seems to be like the hated wife. I feel like there's a lot
Yeah.
of gender stuff in this. That's
This is a movie for men. For
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It feels extremely dated in the way that
Sort of a pre-2 would be the way I describe this movie.
yeah, yeah. It's very bad.
Yeah.
The astronomer
We'll get into that later.
the astronomer Carl notices something burning up in the sky, and he demands that his wife like bring him the phone numbers for the guys at NASA. And she's like, "Do it yourself," and he's like, "Bring me those phone." It's like not sure what's going on there. Then we cut to some incredibly non problematic black characters who live in New York.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like really troubling caricatures.
Yeah, just like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
what were we doing with our major motion pictures?
And there's the mimicking of the accent from the cab driver to the passenger, right?
Yeah,
It's very strange racial work right out of the gates.
and there's a guy who's walking his dog, and
Mhm.
he gets into a conflict, and as this conflict is sort of bubbling up, he gets into conflict with a black character gets in conflict with a Latino character, and as they're fighting, a meteor falls, and the Latino character is killed. The dog
Instantly. It falls right on him, in fact.
directly on him, yeah, and then the dog is like knocked into the crater and is just dangling. But of course, the dog doesn't die, thank goodness. But the rest of New York City is then like pretty much leveled by.
But this is one of the right away. It's that you have this incredible catastrophe in New York, but things kind of normalize.
Well, we see the Chrysler building fall like spire
Yeah.
first into the ground. This is like an event that, if it happened in real life, would be another 9/11. I mean, it'd be
that's right.
just like a.
We actually don't. I think we see the World Trade Center burning.
Oh, we do, in fact, and
Yes,
this was 3 years, an ominous portent.
Right.
Um, all of this is just a harbinger of things to come. However,
it gets even worse.
As NASA quickly realizes, there's a globe killer coming. An asteroid that is in fact the size of Texas.
Just the size of Texas?
That's all, right?
That's it? Pesky little guy?
This is one of the things that I'm just like, what are we doing here? Yeah. Like, this is, like, an asteroid would have to be, like, the size of Manhattan, I think, to, like, really destroy the Earth, almost, right? No, the size of Texas? It's the size of France.
Don't really understand how big Texas is.
Texas is gigantic, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like that's like almost that would be a moon of many planets, right? Yeah. I mean, so I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it's just for dramatic purposes. They were like, well, we gotta get some real stakes, and you know what's going to threaten America? I know it's a Texas-sized meteor or whatever.
Right.
There's a little.
I mean, is it sort of playing into the oil thing, like
the drillers
size problem?
They gotta go to, yeah, that could be
some oil men.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson, whom I don't love, but he is a good factually oriented, a little too factually oriented, if you ask me. Scientist said that this is the most scientifically inaccurate film per minute, like per capita, like. There are more like improbabilities in each section of it than in any other film. I think it's something more recently topped it, but this is high on his list of ridiculous films. There's an article in 2012. Some scientists at a university did. This is from the Daily Telegraph, not my favorite paper, but they said a mathematical analysis of the situation found that for their approach to be effective, the approach is they're going to drill a bomb into the asteroid and blow it up, right? They would need to be in possession of an H-bomb 1 billion times stronger than the Soviet Union's Big Ivan, the biggest H-bomb ever detonated, right? The so-called
just a billion times?
Yeah, the Tsar Bomba, right? Which is a bomb that was so big that the plane that dropped it on the test barely escaped, right? Right. But just 1 billion times stronger than that, and we'll be all set. So a lot of not a lot of scientific realism in this picture. No. I think is what I'm getting at here. And
sort of aggressively pivoting to the other way, because it's an interesting choice, because it wouldn't, like you said, I mean, even the small things like the size of the asteroid, you could cover all your bases. The threat could be just as serious.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, with the reason. Also, like the idea that there's a Texas-sized asteroid that no one is aware of.
Right. They didn't see, and yet it was close enough that its debris hit a shuttle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
None of it adds up right out of the gate, and it feels like it would have been so easy to make it add up, even like considering all the license you get when you're making a movie.
We already did Don't Look Up. Another asteroid hits the Earth. Well, that's a comet, but similar space object. And they have months and years to, right? Because someone notices it, and and this, it's like, no, there's a globe killer on the way, and it's going to come and hit us and kill us all in 18 days.
Just the 18 days, right?
Yeah, I did some research on this, and like best case scenario is it would take like 1 to 5 years to get an operation even remotely similar to the one we see in this movie, off the ground. Like, we just don't have the capabilities to like load up a nuke in a space shuttle that can get far enough away from the Earth to divert it.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
it kind of feels like the 3-body problem, where they're just like, oh well, we better push all the nukes along so that the thing keeps going really fast. If we get that done in the next quarter, we're fucked.
So we finally meet. We meet Billy Bob Thornton, who's the president's science advisor, who for some reason lives in the Pentagon. Seems like, right? Yeah. Not sure that's where the science advisor usually is hanging out, but never mind. There's a lot of meetings about what do we do? What do we do? Why don't we just nuke them? And this other
Right.
science advisor is like, that's a waste of, that's not going to do anything. Keith David, the actor, is there. He plays a skeptical admiral or Air Force guy.
Right.
He's just like, nah, you think any of this is going to work? He's the sort of comes back a few times once the plan gets rolling, and he's like, you got a bunch of losers trying to,
Yeah.
he's like...
It's also interesting because in a sense, many of the NASA, the scientists, are portrayed in kind of this hapless, nerdy manner.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's very anti-science, right?
Well, yes. I mean, on many levels.
Yeah, but in terms of just like then the idea of turning to this ragtag group of oil men, as though because the greatest minds in NASA and the entire space department, no astronaut could do any of these things, so we have to go get these exact people.
Yeah, during filming, I think Owen Wilson or someone asked Michael Bay, they were like, wait, why would it be easier to train oil drillers to be astronauts and not the other way around?
To be oil drillers,
and Michael Bay was like, shut the F up. Which, respect. Like,
sorry, Owen, did your check clear? Okay, I'm gonna need you to shut the hell up.
It's just awesome. So we finally
we see Bruce Willis, right? And this is one of the great of many sort of like late 90s moments, right? Where we get the Greenpeace as villain entry point, right? Or kind of like the mocking of the environmentalist in this very 90s way.
Yeah.
These crunchy folks who are out on this boat and yelling at the oil men, and Bruce Willis, who's the head of who plays Harry Stamper.
Yeah.
Right? And he runs the oil rig, and he's just hitting golf balls at the Greenpeace guys because he doesn't give a fuck,
Right. Very 90s. Like, the environment, like when environmentalists were literally like the scum of the earth. Right.
That's right.
Like considered to be like lower than the like worst criminal.
Like totally unserious people outside of any frame of existence that you might consider like being a part of, right?
Yeah. And I certainly carried that prejudice, not intellectually, but just kind of from growing up in that time.
Absolutely.
It was something that you would encounter, like
even when you were like, well, you hear something, you're like, that sounds like it could be right or important. You were like, you guys are weird.
Yeah. I mean, we
like what they're doing to like JD Vance now. It felt like
that was
really
done too
on environmentalism writ large in this era.
Foolish. Maybe if we hadn't done that.
Yes, not a great idea. But then we get another moment of the time, which is sort of co-lead Ben Affleck,
AJ,
on the heels of Good Will Hunting, right? This is in his ascendancy.
It's like around the same time, yeah. Oh yeah, no, I think Good Will Hunting is a year before, 97.
Yeah, and so this is his play for movie stardom, right?
Yeah,
box office. Yeah,
because he's in one of those Tom Clancy ones not that long after it. Some of All Fears.
He looks fantastic.
He looks so young, right?
His teeth are so white in this movie. Extraordinarily. I mean, they have a reflection. It's insane, his teeth.
Yeah.
And we are introduced to him. He's a maverick oil digger, right?
He doesn't play by the rules.
No, whatever those rules are, he doesn't care for them because he's got a gut, and his gut says, I can drill a bit more. So maybe we should drill here.
Right. So once again, we have this empirical science, hard, fast rules. No. Human instinct. There's like this dynamic of
this spot. I don't care what your computer says. This spot's got oil.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the oil that I know because I've been around this rig, right? And of course, he's not on the job at the moment that he is introduced.
Because he's hooking up with the daughter of Harry, the Bruce Willis character, who is, of course, Liv Tyler, who is known as Grace, I think is her name.
Grace, yeah.
And she lives... It's a funny kind of dynamic because we learn that AJ is an orphan and that Bruce Willis, Harry, has raised him for some number of years and kind of brought him into the trade.
Yeah.
He is single, his wife having left him for presumably not wanting to live on the oil rig or
or just not wanting to be with Harry Stamper anymore, who
yeah,
seems like
a
totally humorless piece of shit.
Yeah. But
the daughter stayed with him, even though she refuses to call him dad.
Right. She calls him
It's
Harry.
all over the place.
Yeah, just... like, what are we doing here, folks?
Right. And that's another one that was a strange decision by the writers, because another part of this era, and a little earlier too, is that a lot of stories would be focused on fathers, and the way that they would do this often is the mother would be dead. Think Full House.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. That and that any sense of having a story about a father raising children, particularly daughters, they would often use this. The mother actually passed away. Not even a character in the show.
Or like Three Men and a Baby, right?
That's right.
That's
right.
The hilarity of a man trying to raise a child.
Right. And in this case, it would seem to be a very easy, screenwriting tactic to employ here, where the mother would be dead, right? And they would have this dysfunctional relationship accordingly. But instead, it's this strange story that the mom left the daughter, who doesn't like the dad, who she can't even bring to call him dad.
But she stayed. And she's the liaison officer for their offshore drilling operation.
She's something of a prodigy, right? She spent her whole life on the rig. She knows how it works. She's been around the muscle.
And she speaks Chinese, as we learned.
For some reason. Fluently.
Some Chinese characters come to the Thinking of Investing.
Some clients. They are the client.
Exactly.
Yeah. And she's sleeping with Ben Affleck, or AJ.
And
we get a very classic
paternalism,
shotgun at prom type moment,
where he literally gets a gun and chases AJ around their oil rig, shooting at him,
shooting his own oil rig, delaying all of the work, right?
Just before these big clients arrive. Also, very doesn't make any sense. Like, if my boss did that, I would have them arrested. It's like, excuse me, HR?
Yeah, but that's because you've lost fundamental respect for the patriarchy that was
I've been emasculated by the 21st century.
Right, but it's not even just Bruce Willis. I mean, we don't have to get too far in the weeds in this moment, because there's a lot to talk about. But it's all of the other men are also very weird. So the Buscemi guy has this weird sort of pseudo-sexual relationship with Grace when she was much younger. He has this weird line where he's like
he taught her how to use a tampon.
I didn't actually show her. There's creepy shit going on. And then this weird throwaway line where Buscemi's like, just Harry, I didn't even know how old she was, which makes no sense.
Right. How would you not know?
How would you not know?
You would assume she's 25 when she's
agree that she's hot now. That's part of that Harry has to come to grips with it because she's hot.
Yeah, it's
so crazy.
It's insane. So all of this is set up because then the military arrive and they're like, "Sir, we need you. You've got to be." And he's like, "Is this a joke?" They're like, "We assure you, it's not a joke." He's like, "Well, can my daughter come?" They're like, "Fine, whatever." He flies Harry and Grace to Washington to meet Billy Bob Thornton and all of his astronaut buddies, essentially.
Scientists.
Because they've discovered this incoming asteroid, and it is going to kill everyone in 18 days, maybe 17 days now. And sorry, all the crew, meanwhile, disperse. The other oil guys, they just
all over the country.
They leave, go all over very quickly, right? And
also they can shoehorn a get the posse back together.
Yeah, but it's the time of this really bothered me, because it's he needs his crew there immediately, but then there's a rounding them up sequence.
Right, but it's so top secret that they can't tell the crew, so the crew is left to go away. But it's also not top secret enough to keep the daughter out of the room, because he just simply says, "I'll tell her eventually."
Yeah, it doesn't. The information security is abominable. Also, no one knows. New York was destroyed, recall, a few days ago. But no one...
I said, though, it's disappeared from the airwaves. Somehow the oil rig guys have no idea it even happened, even though it's in the 90s.
And you'd think like that alone, as I said, would be like the craziest thing that ever happened, and there'd be like round the clock panic about it.
Yeah.
And no one suspects this could be like an omen of worse to come.
But what they've realized apparently is that even though the asteroid again is the size of Texas, all they have to do is drill 800 feet into the asteroid itself, and that put an H-bomb, a nuclear bomb in there.
Yeah.
And once that detonates, amazingly, the entire thing
will split in half.
Split exactly in two. Right? So they have no idea where they're going to land on the actual asteroid and how that would work out geometrically. But it would
as long as it's 800 feet, it's fine.
As long as it's 800 feet, it just so happens that it splits it in two no matter what. And sets it on a trajectory as long as they do it in time.
The two halves
go right around the Earth. Right. And the only people to do this, like you said, are not astronauts who could then have 18
or
days.
like military guys or any
types of people who would be ready to learn. Army engineers, right? There's so many people that could do this, but for some reason they just choose an oil team, which is great, like pro-oil propaganda.
Yeah,
right? I mean, it really is.
The real heroes are the oil.
Right. The shuttles are called Freedom and Independence. It is so on the nose, and it's like eventually they lose. We'll talk about this. They lose one of the shuttles for a time, and there's literally the line is actually like, "Thank God we still have freedom." The
shuttle. So all the crew are reunited. Ben Affleck has like been fired, meanwhile, and is already running his own oil rig in Texas somewhere.
Well, that's how good he is too. I mean, it's such a prodigy.
But it has like AJ's oil like up on a sign.
Oh, yeah. He's built it from the ground up.
Presumably in 24 hours. Right. Like I can barely like get lunch in 24 hours.
Right.
Like what are we doing?
And so they do this thing, which is one of the many sequences that are so inexcusable given that it's 2 hours and 31 minutes long.
Yeah.
Right. They've already shown us everybody. Then they reintroduce the characters kind of in like an Ocean's 11 style.
That's right.
Right. They bring all these people back together. And even when they get back together, they have so much to do. But there are all these moments where everyone, I'm sure most people listening to this have seen it. Of course, it comes down to the very last second, etc.
Yeah.
But there are so much. The amazing thing, knowing what happened, rewatching it, there is so much inexplicable wasted time in the course of the 18 days as they are trying to get this done. So, like, for example, the oil guys, they're not, because they're so rough and tumble, they're actually not that intimidated by, the CIA,
military,
the end of the fucking world. So instead,
and on top of that, they have demands. Like they'll do this,
right? But the demands, they actually spend.
Their demands are like, no, we don't ever want to pay taxes again.
Right.
Good.
Parking tickets. Can you deal with our parking tickets?
One of them wants to live in the White House, Lincoln bedroom for the summer.
Right, and then the last one, of course, they can't resist the joke. It's can you tell us who killed Kennedy? And of course, we can't quite go there.
CIA guys are like, nah.
Yeah, right. So now they have to become.
It's Oswald. Anyway.
Right. So now they have to become astronauts, right?
Which they can do in like 3 days, right? Of course.
Right. Which again, it would make sense that this would take some time, and these scenes sort of make sense.
Well, they do a psychological testing montage first to make sure they're suitable.
Yeah.
No one passes.
And it doesn't matter that they are.
they all fail, but they still get to do it anyway because why not? Well, we just need a weird scene of Steve Buscemi calling every Rorschach blot like a woman's breast.
But then,
or something.
like the big one that before we get onto the ship, the big one for me, of course, is that they've just been running so hard doing all this training. It's like, yeah, man, like of course they've been working hard. A meteor is about to take out the entire planet.
Yeah,
and Bruce Willis convinces the higher ups that they've got to let their guys have one night, and it suggests, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something,
sure.
But it suggests to me that they, considering how time dependent this entire project was, they could have gone up a full day earlier.
Yeah.
And really got this thing right.
That way, if anything went wrong, there'd be.
If anything went wrong, they have a whole.
By the way, a lot will go wrong, right?
Yes, if you can imagine, yes, things do go wrong.
One of the characters in this is this movie reminded me a lot of The Postman, my favorite movie of all time, and also the worst movie of all time.
Yeah.
Will Patton, who played General Bethlehem in The
Yeah.
Postman, plays Chick in this movie. He's the guy
Yeah.
who's got a wife that he doesn't
He's
speak
my
to
favorite
anymore.
character.
He has
He's
a
my favorite.
kid who's never met him. The
He
wife,
actually said the mom explains to the kid for
he's a
his whole life that that's
salesman.
a salesman.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, they have this night. You know, Harry is
They get in a bar brawl. They get in a bar brawl. Well, a strip club brawl.
sure. Harry is gradually accepting the fact that AJ and Grace are in love, and he's kind
And
of
how does he find that out? He like weirdly stares at them.
he spies
hooking
on them
up
hooking up. Yeah,
for a really long time.
yeah. It's definitely classic dad behavior. What
Yeah.
dad doesn't love to do that.
Yeah.
While this is all happening, by the way, Shanghai destroyed by another asteroid.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Only 50K killed in Shanghai, a city of 25 million people. Interesting.
But we soldier on. In fact, there's a great news clip, as we love to talk about in these movies.
Yeah.
50,000 people were dead, which has rattled the nation, referring to America. I loved that. A nation rattled. I guess after New York didn't do it.
Yeah.
New York being blown up didn't do it, but
So 1 hour into the movie, they finally like get on the spaceships.
But they still waste time. They do. Ben Affleck sings "Jet Plane."
Oh my god!
While they're
loading, and then while they're loading onto the plane, they all sing a horrific. Oh my god!
Yeah, truly. I mean, that scene I just think is I get this in a lot of these movies. I do think about how funny it would be to watch it being filmed like on set.
Yeah.
Where they're explaining that to Affleck that he's got to sing this terrible version of Jet Plane, and then Buscemi's got to start singing it, and Owen Wilson's got to take a harmony. It's very funny to imagine these like stars churning this fucking garbage out.
Yeah. I mean, they're all getting paid well, I hope.
Oh, yeah. But on the day, it still must be so hilarious to watch it.
Yeah. It's while they're getting into the launch vehicles to take off, we hear the president give a rousing speech because while this is all happening, after Shanghai, news leaks somehow. Yeah. After New York getting blown up wasn't Shanghai too? Okay, something's up.
Yeah, Bob Woodward finally got on it after the Shanghai incident.
Yes, Cy Hirsch snuck into the Oval Office.
When the president, this happens both when the president's talking and when people are watching and after. Do you notice that so many of the clips of Americans?
Yeah.
Take place in what seems to be like the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
It's like
they do there's a montage.
Depression era bomb shelters that people.
Yeah, but there's also like Paris and like Istanbul. They like go all over You see the
they're
blue
all
mosque.
portrayed in the most stereotypical way. So of course everyone in Paris is still sitting at a cafe.
Everyone's like eating a baguette and like putting their berets on, and the Muslims are like all getting ready for prayer.
People are still working. There's a waiter at the cafe. Yeah, there's someone sweeping.
Your favorite thing, the idea of the guys who keep going to work even though the meteor is about to.
That's right. Someone's getting a haircut.
Yeah, of course. I got to look good when I'm destroyed by the meteor.
That's right.
They get into space, and as they're loading up the bomb, Steve Buscemi jumps on the bomb and does a Dr. Strangelove thing. Obligatory, I guess. But before that, they have to rendezvous with the Mir space station because they need to fuel up there. Because there's just a bunch of fuel on the Mir waiting for when it doesn't seem real, but okay.
Doesn't
and Peter Stormare.
I guess the Mir's just storing gas in case anybody needs to fly to
it doesn't make any sense. Stormare is on. He's the Russian Lev.
He's fantastic.
He's great. I love that there's him and Buscemi. There's these Coen brothers veterans hanging around.
And the Russian space station.
And Billy Bob, right? Also
right. Space station guy's been there for 18 months. He's completely out of sorts.
Yeah.
And he is the hero of the movie in a very
for sure. Yeah. But it's also that weird détente with Russia moment of the late 90s, right? Where Russia is our friends now.
That's
so
right.
We'll have
That's
this
right.
one.
So when you hear about the space mission, which never would have happened if this had been made, 10 years before, of course, China is the one left out of the mission. Right?
Well, right. Yeah, so although Shanghai does get destroyed in the
right. But the space station got because
10 years later, there would have been a Chinese astronaut
but
coming along.
it is a détente, but they still have to get in the dig. So of course the space station is Russian. So
and it's falling apart.
It is falling to pieces. They are not investing in their space program.
And it is in fact destroyed during their right. Like the the wrench he's using, like the valve breaks off.
Breaks.
But
the space station guy, the Russian, saves Ben Affleck, saves essentially everybody, makes sure everybody gets off.
And they get on, and now they're in their 2 space shuttles are rendezvousing with the asteroid at long last.
Well, they have to go around the moon first.
They do a slingshot around the moon, a gravity slingshot. It's obligatory.
So it gives you the moment where they're all praying that they'll get contact again. And then one of like the 12 different clips in this 2.5-hour movie where Houston all claps, right?
Yeah. Oh boy. And they're going to detonate. They get there, but one of the planes the Independence is basically destroyed on landing. Most of the characters on that are killed, including Owen Wilson, R.I.P., gone too soon.
The other heroes of the movie, of course, the pilots, because they're getting attacked by, what seems like 25 million pieces of asteroid debris, but
they're just like zooming around all of it.
One of the greatest like video game efforts of all time by these guys.
Yeah.
One doesn't make it, or at least crash land, gets destroyed.
Lands, but Affleck and the cosmonaut Lev and Bear, one of the other driller characters, survive and are able to get into their lunar rover type device.
Oh, what's this here? Oh, it's our escape device. Perfect. It's still good.
It's perfect. And then so they figure out somehow where the other crew has landed, which is in fact 26 miles off target, on top of a massive sheet of iron.
Yeah, no communication.
Which you think would be really difficult to drill through, and
they do suggest it is difficult. It suggests that Harry Stamper, Bruce Willis, is going to have to, I guess, try really, really hard. That's the tension, right?
So they start drilling. Initially, they believe the other, ship is dead and everyone's dead on it.
And it's not going well.
And
8 different characters say
William Fichtner, who's Pierce, is the astronaut like in charge. He's the guy who trained them. He has a gun for some reason, which he pulls out, and he's like, "I'm just going to detonate the bomb here, and we'll hope for the best, and we'll all die." Yeah. And Bruce Willis is like, "Give me a chance to drill. I've
never not made my depth."
Yeah.
Which does enough to turn him eventually.
Yeah, they're struggling with a gun, like why does he have a gun? Like, what?
I don't know.
Whose call was that? We're like, oh, by the way, like just pass him a pistol.
I think it might be in case somebody, as Steve Buscemi does, sort of loses their mind and needs to be taken out for the.
He gets space dementia, right? So he's on the roof of the rover car as they're trying to drill.
Famously known space dementia.
It's real. It's very real and very well documented. For some reason there's a machine gun on top of it also, which he just starts firing at random.
Yep.
Logical. Definitely need to have some ammo up there in case of aliens, I guess. They catch him, they tie him up, but while they're drilling again, disaster strikes. They hit a pocket of gas, and the rover is popped off, and Max, one of the characters who was in the drilling box, is dead. He just floats off into space. I'm sure that's a wonderful last, however long his oxygen lasted. So the mission's doomed. They have no drill. And then, miracle of miracles, Ben Affleck and the second team arrive. And
what are the chances?
And Lev, the cosmonaut, has like guided them across this canyon. They've like fired their thrusters. They've somehow, made this improbable.
He briefly has to leave the armadillo, as it's called.
He has to go out and like trigger something. It's amazing. While all this happening, by the way, Paris, site of our recently concluded Olympics, also destroyed.
Fantastic shot, actually.
Yeah, it's just like
with the Eiffel Tower getting blown up.
Yeah, it's like no, the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci's greatest work. Like what are we doing here, people? I wonder if they snuck the Da Vinci into a vault as they did in 2012,
Sure.
right? Hopefully,
Sure.
hopefully it
But
got.
yeah, it's like it's the next example of this Russian character really doing all the heavy lifting. And of course, as we know, by the end, it is getting obviously none of the real credit of
No, no, of course
of the
not.
mission.
He's Russian. So the surface of the asteroid is really funny because while they're traveling to it, it looks pretty cool. Like it's
Mhm.
90s CGI, but it looks,
Yeah.
it looks cool. But when they're on the set, like drilling, it looks just like a set. It looks
That's
like
right. That's right.
it's so fake looking. It
Yeah.
just really gives a lie to all the oh, moon landing was just a set, Kubrick. It's like, come on, guys. Like Hollywood in the 90s wasn't good enough to make an with a budget of 200 and whatever $1 million
Yeah.
couldn't like,
Yeah.
but in the 60s we would spend that money anyway. Another thing
Mhm.
that bothers me, moon landing skepticism. Um so many things bother me, as we by now know. It's getting pretty dark too, because as they're drilling, the apocalyptic energy on the asteroid's surface is just, this debris starts flying. Like
That's right.
it's just getting more hellish as
Right.
they
And
persist.
of course, the other tension that they decide they also, as you always have to have in these movies, is that another part of the military industrial complex has their backup plan,
Which is to
right?
just blow the bomb whenever they.
Which is to blow the bomb up. And so Harry has to convince everybody to not do that. Billy Bob is trying to do his part.
Right, he's like sabotaging the connection on the ground,
Right.
and
Because he trusts this guy that he met 18 days ago that he can save the planet
yeah,
somehow.
Liv
Every
Tyler at one
single thing
point
has gone wrong.
punches Billy Bob a few
Well, Liv
times.
Tyler is also just allowed
She's
in the
just
most
in
like
the Pentagon or
sensitive national security
Houston, wherever
environment
they
in the
are.
history of the world. And they're like, you just stay here and grieve and freak out emotionally every now and then. Well, you know what? You can stay right by all the buttons just in case you get that.
Guess you want to push one of them just for
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I felt like there was a lot of pointless drama at
Yeah.
this. Like, just none of it felt like I had no tension. I mean, I've seen it before, of course, but even at the time, I remember being like, "All right, like
Right.
we know they're gonna do it. Like, what are we
That's right.
doing here?" Because uh, while during one of these like asteroid storms, the triggering mechanism, it would have allowed them to detonate the bomb
Mm.
from, gets damaged. The bomb itself, fine.
Right.
You can still
So
trigger
the
it
plan is to fly away
and
with
then
everybody
and then
safe
press the
and
button.
detonate. Yeah.
Yeah. But that won't work anymore. Someone's gonna have to stay. They reach the depth. AJ trusts his gut, even though signs are bad, and they
It
get.
looks really bad, and Ben Affleck, who has been admonished many times over his career as an oil digger
Yeah,
by Harry Stamper. Harry Stamper looks deep into Ben Affleck's incredibly frightened eyes and says, "You know what? Make the call.
I believe
Make the
in you.
call." Yeah.
The sort of ultimate paternal validation that he's never
and
quite
and
received.
he wins. He gets to the depth by simply announcing that he knows he can push through, and he does in fact push through. And it's like it all goes back to this very weird psychosexual drama that they're playing out. There's something very phallic about it, you know.
Yeah,
It's mighty
yeah.
Ben Affleck with his mighty big drill penis
Well,
just
after
getting in.
Dad's drill broke, and now
Dad's drill don't have it
son's
anymore. Yeah,
drill, and he's gonna
you got to pass
marry
the
his
torch. That's
daughter.
right.
So there's
That's
this
right.
incest like
Yeah,
subplot, and
yeah.
so
The sheer virility of a man like Affleck is the only thing standing between us and extinction.
it's true, isn't it? But now someone has to stay behind, so they draw
Uh-oh.
straws.
And this is a great moment.
And they just
too.
has the straws ready for this.
Well, it's not just the straws being ready, right? It's the fact that they only need two. They need two people to fly the plane, right?
So the pilots are off.
The pilots are fine, but they only need one person to take care of business. Two people volunteer.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis, Harry says, "It's my job. I always finish my job. I'm an American oil man."
Yeah.
Right? And the other guy, my favorite moment of the whole movie, is of course the other Americans are shitting their pants
Yeah.
at the idea of having to actually sacrifice themselves for the good of humanity. And the Russian guy goes, "You guys think I can go back home?" and like having not being like volunteered to complete the mission.
Yeah.
I'm from Russia, like they'll put me in the gulag if they find out. So not only is he the truest hero,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
truest hero that he's willing to sacrifice, but they have two options. But of course, for some reason,
they still make everyone who's able draw straws.
Well, the one guy, who is it? The guy from Postman, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I just can't let you do that for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I have too much
it
pride.
has to be random. It's not fair. Like, and again, the clock is ticking.
We're like
now.
5 minutes from,
and they are just going back and forth over whether it should be a random choice or whether the two people who are perfectly willing to do this and give themselves enough time to accomplish it.
And this feels so contrived.
It is so wild that this could happen. And then, of course, they draw straws. And one of the guys, two of the guys who said they volunteer, they don't get the straw.
And AJ does.
Who's the only life that matters because he has found love.
And he's young. They're all old.
That's right. And of course, he is willing to do it.
Because he's a good American. But he and Bruce Willis is like, I'll take him down.
You know what? I'll take him down. I'll show him out.
What could happen here?
What could possibly happen here? Which also leads to a great moment where, of course, Bruce Willis throws him back in the chamber.
Pulls his oxygen out so that he literally couldn't do it even if he wanted to.
And of course, Ben Affleck announces that this is his job. And all of a sudden, that's the most important thing to him, even though it wasn't ever before.
Or like 5 minutes ago. Everything he didn't want to do it. Yeah.
Yes. And it's now his job, and he's going to do it. And of course, that's not his job anymore, Stu. Do you know what his job is? According to Harry Stamper,
take care of my little girl.
Care of his little girl.
Yeah. His 25-year-old daughter.
Again, of course, we have to have the little girl send off, and of course that gets.
And then he says, "You're the son I never had," or something.
Right. But like,
they almost have like a Spock and dying in the radiation, like just a Vulcan hand.
The funny thing is, you have all these people on edge. You have this whole crisis of volunteering and not volunteering. Bruce Willis has said he's going to do it. I like to reimagine the end of the movie when I rewatched it, where it's like Affleck comes back up. Well, he's not who they're expecting. I like to imagine the astronaut turning on Affleck and being like, "You fucking threw that old man to the wolves, didn't you?" Right? That it wasn't. And Affleck's like, "No, I promise. Harry wanted to do this," and then Affleck gets to go home, but is shamed forever. Like push this old man out into the ether.
No, I like it.
Yeah, but no, that is of course not what happens, and it's still to the death, right? It's still right against the clock. Something must have gone wrong, and they briefly.
And they're still wanting to just detonate it from afar,
That's right.
Which they can still do apparently, but the astronauts cannot for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
But again, Billy Bob is like, "No, I believe in Harry Stamper."
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Okay, Billy. And then, of course, Harry is also in love with Billy Bob, and the only thing that matters to him, it's not like, say this to my daughter or whatever. He tears off a badge and make sure that Billy Bob Thornton receives this badge. Like, it's the most important thing in the world at the moment.
It's very bizarre. So Harry gets left. They escape. There's a great scene where the female astronaut is unable to like get the propulsion thing going, and then Lev,
who is able to do it?
The cosmonaut, once again, just pushes her out of the way.
But he has to wrestle with American sexual gender politics briefly.
Yeah.
And say, I don't want to be canceled here by aggressively pushing the woman out of the way.
But he does.
But eventually, his rough Russian ways win out.
And he just like bashes it, and it works immediately. Just like hitting the top of the TV or something.
Oh my god, it's so
blowing
good.
on the Nintendo cartridge.
And he saves the day again. That's right.
What a brilliant man. Then of course they escape, but there's more complications because this is another asteroid storm knocks Harry over, and the detonator falls out of his hand, and and the pilot's like, "Well, the bomb should have gone off by now. We got to go back.
We got to go back.
And
let's just go back."
And AJ is like, "No." Like Harry will get or Chick or one of them.
Because the idea is if they go back, they would all die, but the world would be saved. But even in that moment, none of these American astronauts are willing to go, or oil men are willing to go back and do the job, even though it looks like it's not being done, by the way. It's it's a catastrophic debacle of an ending.
And we see, before this happens, though, we see him somehow have a direct conversation with his daughter back in Houston or wherever they are. Yeah. Right. And she's like, Daddy, no, like, you can't be. You know, it's like she's reduced to just like this infantile state.
Right. Well, little girl, if you will.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, what are we doing? My note for this is like, so much tensionless drama.
That's right. That's right. So then he, of course,
struggles. He gets the detonator.
Gets to the detonator.
Presses the button, and then we zoom through. And then
there's instantly this amazingly like
abstract. Sequence.
Totally forced.
Zooms through Liv Tyler's eye into like a cosmos beyond, and
her life as a child. These flashes of Harry. It's totally nuts. And then they land. Right? the astronauts get back and the
asteroid splits exactly as planned, and the two halves
400 miles. They both it just perfectly in half. Everything's fine.
And they shoot off presumably into the sun or whatever.
Right. Everyone's so happy. Only 3 of the world's major cities have been completely destroyed. So it's very and they get back from outer space,
and like just those cities
slide down a water slide, one of those like
the emergency exit. Yeah, that's very bizarre.
And there's no decompression. They're just back on planet Earth.
Yeah.
All of these people are allowed onto the tarmac to come visit.
Chick's wife, who he's been divorced from for years.
To say nothing of the stripper that Steve Buscemi is dating at the strip club, randomly is just allowed onto this. I mean, I guess maybe once you've saved the world.
Right, but I mean, like, how did these people even know where to go to be in?
How would they know where to go?
Because there's a scene earlier where they're showing the astronauts launching, and the kid's like, there's that salesman on TV. And the mom's like, that's not a salesman, little Jimmy. That's your dad, you know?
Yeah, he's about to save the world, so I can let you in on a secret. You know? Which is also like it feels weirdly anti-women, right? Because he's not really portrayed as a bad guy. He's a bit of a like...
Well, he's odd on the rig, and he's an absent figure.
Right, and she's so ashamed of this hardworking man that she has to hide.
Yeah.
But now that he's finally accomplished something,
by literally saving the world,
by saving.
Now she can admit that this is actually your father.
And then, of course, a perfectly centered shot, as you can imagine, of Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler kissing in celebration. All that really matters is that the two of them can have what will no doubt eventually be an unhappy marriage. And how traumatized they both are, and
the fact that her dad, they're both their father figures.
Right. So. Before AJ goes on to marry Jennifer Garner and Jennifer Lopez. And then, of course, also a moment that is great throughout the movie and at the end is that all of her romantic sequences, she is played along to by her real life father.
Right. You don't want to miss a thing. Aerosmith.
So you have the Bruce Willis character, you have the father sort of controlling her life, and then every time she's having sex or making out with her fiance, her dad is singing
the
to
actress's
her.
father.
Right.
And he didn't even know her until she was like 20.
Yeah.
He was a complete absent father.
Right.
Oh, well, you're a celebrity now? Oh, you want to be in my music video?
Maybe his wife was just telling Liv he was a salesman. And then when he finally got a number one hit on Aerosmith.
There's that salesman in Aerosmith.
That song "Dream On" that you love so much. That's your dad, right? And then it ends with this incredibly obnoxious credit sequence where all the dads who are now the dads that replaced Bruce Willis, all the oil rig guys,
she's getting married.
Yeah, and they're all giving her little.
But then there are these big photos of all the guys that died in the mission.
But they're all in the space uniforms. They couldn't locate any other photos from all the
and they had actual headshots made of them.
Yeah, like in the 18 days that they were trying to save the world. Like, okay, 2 p.m. is photo day, so please be there on time. Things are tight. Someone suggests maybe not doing the photos, and they're like, "What if they all die and there's a wedding after all of this? What would you do?" But of course, I looked through the credits, and from what I could tell, and maybe a listener who has seen this more often than I, but from what I could tell, it appears as though the Russian wasn't even invited to the wedding.
Yeah, yeah.
He doesn't appear,
He's
which
back.
I would
He's
think,
back in Russia, Michael. He's being
I would think,
feted as the new.
when you see a couple and they get married and there's someone at the wedding and you're kind of like, do you really know anybody? But they're part of like maybe the meeting story.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
friend of a friend. They
yeah,
introduce
yeah.
them. Of course, you've got to be at our wedding. Apparently, this relatively anonymous Russian space station guy who saved humanity six, seven
And
times,
specifically her husband.
and her husband, right?
Like,
And the marriage.
repeatedly. Yeah.
He can't even, never mind a +1. He can't even get their stag. It's ridiculous.
I mean, you're great, Michael. I don't know. I had nothing to say about this. I was
I loved how bad it was. It's those movies where you treat it sort of fundamentally as a comedy.
Yeah.
And I do love the way that they sort of riff, that you find out just randomly that Steve Buscemi's character is actually the smartest person in America. It's all just like cobbled together. And it's sort of a time where you could do that with the good faith that you were going to make $500 million.
Oh yeah.
Like it wouldn't, not only could you be this lazy, it would crush.
And I mean, the song of the summer, right?
One of the songs of the decade.
Yeah. Could not escape it.
Cannot escape it, right?
I mean, I would say "Smooth" was the song of the decade.
You know who else would say that? Rob Thomas. He has said it. This is true. I once saw an interview with him.
Yeah.
Where he's obviously such a pretentious. I don't know why we're talking about Rob Thomas.
Oh, I love Rob Thomas.
I just love this story because I hated him so much growing up. I hated
really.
I hated that.
You love Third Eye Blind, hated Rob Thomas.
I didn't love Third Eye Blind until a little later in my life.
Okay.
Nostalgic thing.
I put some Third Eye Blind on when I was driving home earlier. In your honor.
I always had a spot for Third Eye Blind.
You know what? I wish you would step back from that ledge, my friend. Yes, in your comments about Rob Thomas.
But Rob Thomas, I remember seeing him back when they would interview people on your MTVs.
Sure. VH1. Yeah.
They're interviewing Rob Thomas and they're asking him about working with Carlos Santana. And his response, instead of talking about, being so derangedly lucky.
Well, Carlos is such a legend, it's really in my honor to be in the same room as him, right?
Absolutely.
What you would normally say.
Right. And instead he says, we recorded it and it was a great experience. And Carlos came up to me and he said, this song, this is your generation's Black Magic Woman. Which is a conversation that 100% did not take place.
Yeah, and also like I would argue Smooth is like much more influential.
Well, yes, but it's also just like the idea of Santana.
He's like, you know what, Rob?
Hey, come closer. I have something to tell you.
Is the close up ready? Have you guys? Do you guys do that again? Right. I mean, it feels completely fictional.
But the one thing, just to wrap it up, one thing that I think I really love about the movie is how of its time it is, right? And obviously we talked about that a lot. But it's the thing that sort of sticks out is that sort of right before the sort of like end of Clinton, pre 9/11.
Yeah. End of history era. Yeah.
Right. Where you weren't in the like oil politics of George W. yet.
Nope.
Right. You weren't in like the peak oil moment of that type of like the viscerally like anti BP Enron, like
global war on terror, like Iraq oil, all that stuff. Yeah.
There was this seamlessness to the propaganda.
Yeah.
That almost felt not political still. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Like it presents itself now as like obviously an incredibly propagandized political, pro-oil, pro-American piece. But the way they used to be able to churn these out, it manages to not like feel as heavy-handed as it's sort of like it just wasn't as political a moment almost.
No, it wasn't. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And well, it's fun. I hated the movie. I think it's the movie I've hated the most of any that we've done. But
really, I didn't. I liked it enough. I thought
2012 was so much better than this. this. I was like 2012. I was just
Here's
on
the
the
thing.
edge of my seat.
I think 2012 is a better movie, but I promise you this.
Yeah.
This was not the last time I will watch Armageddon. I'll tell you that right.
All right. So next week we are talking about a different apocalypse.
A real one and a fictitious one in the same episode, right?
Well, I mean, a real one, and then we'll be discussing the fictionalization of it in a recent failed box office bomb, an attempted blockbuster that did not quite make it, and that is the volcanic eruption at Pompeii.
Yes, very excited.
And we'll also be discussing the Kit Harington vehicle, Pompeii. So we'll be talking a little bit about the real history, and then probably focusing a bit more on that. And then,
I hope so.
We'll touch on the movie. Neither of us have seen it yet, so
I know. So it's hard to say exactly where our allegiances will lie. But from the reviews of Pompeii the movie, I think we will be primarily focused on the historical event.
A little bit of a Pliny the Elder, or Pliny the Elder death story, a little Pliny the Younger letter. It'll be good. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And until then, this has been The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
I'm Stu, and we'll talk to you real soon.